Welcome to Startup Grind Virtual Philadelphia. This is our second round of this, and I am so pumped to welcome our guests, plural, today. Repping from CVS Health / Aetna. I know eventually I think you all will have to say all of that together or some combination thereof, but you can sort of introduce each of yourselves and let us know kind of which avenue you came to and what your current role is. We'll get to that in just a second. A couple housekeeping reminders. Again, please let us know if you who you are and where you are and where you're calling in from, who you work for. We love to get to know entrepreneurs and ecosystem supporters around the globe, but especially here in the Northeast Corridor, where we at 1776 are deep into supporting those ecosystems, and we love to know who's joining us on that journey. So please introduce yourself. Of course, make sure you're muted while we go through, just so we have really clean audio for our wonderful guests. But do feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat as we go along. I like to try to do, in order of questions asked, so we can get to those as things come up. And if it's appropriate in the moment to ask that question, then we can just insert it into the conversation. And if you are not already a member of the Philadelphia chapter of Startup Grind, I encourage you to join. You can hear about all of our events, and you get, first chance access to our tickets and other opportunities. So do sign up if you are interested. If you're not familiar with Startup Grind, it's an incredible global community of startups and founders and innovators and creators looking to support one another through sharing stories and sharing best practices and kind of sharing about the sludge of the journey of entrepreneurship and really what it takes to be an innovator and what it takes to thrive and survive on that journey. And so we bring experts or serial entrepreneurs in to talk about what they're up to and what they're seeing and what they can sort of forecast for the people who are tuning in. This evening, I am thrilled to welcome three powerful women from CVS Health Aetna. I'm going to go through and just ask the three of you to introduce yourselves. On my screen in order is Kathy M, Harpreet, and Kathy Y. So let's go in that order. Kathy, I'm starting with you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. I'm similarly excited to be here. And I am, as you said, part of the CVS Health Aetna team. I am part of the Aetna Mental Wellbeing group within Aetna, and I'm responsible for our digital strategy for behavioral health. So around product innovation as it relates to digital health. So anything that has to do with online support, virtual care, digital solutions as it pertains to behavioral health. So that's my role here within Aetna. And just a note, I joined Aetna a couple of years ago, about 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, I worked in the consulting space. So I consulted with employers to design behavioral healthcare programs and strategy and so forth. So I'm coming at it from that experience, working with employers, and now I'm on the health plan side, seeing kind of the system and how things work on this side.
Very cool. And Harpreet, over to you.
So that's great. Hey, everyone. I'm so excited to get together with you guys and talk about the space. I'm very new to behavioral health. I am really, I call myself an innovation architect, have been looking at emerging and new technologies for the past 15 years for various financial and now healthcare companies. Been with CVS Health for about 5 years now. And then I joined Kathy Yacko, who's gonna go next, and it would have been easier if she went first. So that would have just made my life easier. So joined Kathy Yacko's team as post-merger, and have been doing very interesting, cool stuff, talking to all of our various businesses about innovation, especially using and incubating new technologies.
Awesome. And Kathy Y, last but not least.
So yes, I am Kathy Yacko, and I run the I'm the director of the technology innovation team at CVS Health, Aetna. I came originally from Aetna, but within our area, within the office of the CTO, we oversee all lines of business. So it's retail, PBM, and the healthcare business as well. And Harpreet and I have been working recently with Kathleen Mahieu to put together a workshop around how we can move forward our behavioral health practice. But my background, I come from exploring emerging tech for the last, 9 years now with Aetna, and combined with my time since the acquisition with CVS. And so, my specialties are in artificial intelligence, digital experience, advanced analytics, and been running the innovation team for the last year. And so it's been interesting because, this group that I'm talking to tonight, coming from the startup space, we are sort of a mini little startup inside of a corporate space, which has its pluses and minuses. I mean, we have some advantages over new, startups, founders in your arena, in your community, but then we are up against, the slog of corporate America. So we have our own set of challenges. But the behavioral health space is really interesting. It's been obviously it's meaningful to every single one of us as humans, and there's really been a surge in the last year, I think. And then certainly with the situation we're in right now with the pandemic, there's been a huge acceleration. So, I'll pause there. Lots to talk about.
It's a perfect segue. I knew I could count on you, Kathy. And it is really what I wanted to dive into first is, I would say, I would agree that about the past year is when I started hearing about companies like here locally, we have Harpreet. So again, kind of telehealth texting abilities to seek specifically mental health assistance, and for everyone in attendance, I know that's what we advertise this as. May is Mental Health Month. The situation we're all dealing with is, for lack of a better word, it's a trauma, and so all of us are experiencing that in very different ways. Are learning maybe what some of our own personal emotional triggers are, learning how we need to cope as individuals. Some of us maybe as parents or partners, as leaders, bosses, employees. It's a really crazy, fascinating time to be talking about mental health and why it is so important, and how to make it accessible. So I would love to hear, and the three of you, feel free to rotate as you think is appropriate, chime in all together on a question or just one, however you feel is appropriate. But I wanted to ask, what were you seeing kind of brewing before COVID-19? And what were you seeing as maybe some of the barriers for adoption for these new technologies? What were some of the hurdles people were seeing? And then what are you seeing now in terms of a shift to accessibility, a shift to adoption, and maybe some new hurdles that people offering telehealth services for mental health might be experiencing? So what was kind of happening, what was brewing, what were challenges, and what has changed?
Yeah, so I can start, and then Kathy and Harpreet, feel free to chime in. So this is so interesting because, we've been so immersed in COVID response, so it's fun to kind of think back, okay, prior to COVID, how was it? And what's so interesting is virtual care was something we talked about, but it was more along the lines of how do we get people to use it? So televideo for mental health, utilization wasn't even a point on, in terms of the total utilization. And so all of the conversations were, how do we get employers to promote it more? How will individuals engage in that kind of therapy? And how do we get people to do that? And on the digital front, similar conversations. So there's a huge landscape of digital solutions for mental health. And I swear they seem to pop up daily. So, I think I know who's out there, and then the day goes by and a new one comes up. So it's a huge industry. And, I think what I perceived from all of the new startups that have been focusing on mental health is this is an area that people are interested in. It's also an area that needs solutions. The current system is not working for people. Yeah. So having to go see somebody over a period of time, weekly, twice a week, what have you, is not appealing to many people. And so very small percent of people that need mental health care get it. I think the statistic is 20% of people that actually need mental health care actually receive it. And so I think a lot of the digital solutions that have been created have been developed with that in mind. So how do we create a different way of accessing care? And so those were things that we focused on, and they were on our roadmap for promotion and continuation of, and trying to get people more engaged in them. Once COVID hit, utilization of telehealth skyrocketed. I think as Kathy mentioned earlier, a statistic which is to me astounding is there was literally a 5,000% increase in televideo services for mental health.
That's a huge number. That's a very big number.
But you have to realize that very few people used it.
It's true.
And so we saw a huge shift in people moving into, the larger telehealth solutions like a Teladoc, which are national solutions, but also saw a shift in individual practitioners and group practices and treatment programs moving to virtual. And they were able to really move into that space fairly quickly. So that really changed the whole landscape. And so now the conversation is more of how do we continue this?
Yeah.
And how do we kind of gain additional traction based on the experience that we've had with COVID? So the really exciting changes as a result. And Kathy and Harpreet, feel free to add any commentary in addition to what I shared.
So I started working with Kathy. I think we started working together maybe last fall with the roadmap you were talking about. And I think, overall CVS and Aetna have recognized, and probably many other organizations, that behavioral health is a huge part of health and wellness. It's not just for folks that are diagnosed with depression or some other mental health issue. It's it comes and goes throughout your life in many degrees, depending on what's going on, and particularly with folks with chronic illness. It's an issue that you have to really work on mind and body to be healthy. So, one of the things I remember Harpreet was pitching to me back in January was, let's have she was looking ahead at the calendar and seeing Mental Health Awareness Month being May. And I remember, you pitched the idea, Harpreet, about having that sort of, wasn't a virtual thing, although we would have some virtual things, but sort of an in-person, experience where we were going to have different stations you could go to and kind of experience different technologies that could be brought to bear. Because, what we do as a team is look at emerging tech. So we were thinking things like, virtual reality. We were thinking things like, senses and smells that calm you, mood kind of things. And then also all the digital type things that Kathy's been looking into for the last several, months or years of, the digital apps or, the messaging. And, maybe we would have done the telehealth. I'm not even sure that was on our radar screen, but, and things with the telehealth. I mean, the good news is, one is that there's this awareness that it needs to be part of the answer. And also a big part of the social determinants of health. Two, with this uptick, with this pandemic bringing us all a little bit more comfortable, as Kathy was saying, about using digital tools to access and to participate or get our, whether it's regular medical or behavioral health, needs met. That's great, but I think everybody has, and I think Harpreet, you said this last week or the week before, it's not a one size fits all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we do need a big variety of ways in which we can engage folks and bring different types of services, because mental health is such a personal thing.
Yeah.
And depending on your particular situation, the hours that you're available to even take care of yourself, your age group and your propensity to, millennials may feel more comfortable with something different than, 50 somethings or 30 somethings or 70 somethings. And then even, the older crowd may not be as technically savvy. So maybe things that are more voice oriented, or, maybe they just need a check-in and somebody to chat with to feel not so isolated. Whereas others may need some real, I need help with a very specific, depressive thoughts or whatever. So I think there's plenty of room for opportunity for startups or anyone that might be offering services to bring some kind of value to all of us out there.
Yeah. And so I think Kathy talked about January, and back then we were, so taking a step back, if you look at CVS, we are very, very diverse as a business. And 80% of the US population have access to a CVS within 5 miles of their house. So we are very community-centric, local, local accessible health store. And the way we are structured or branded is that we want you to come in to and see us. Like, we want you to have easy access to your via health hubs now, but previously minute clinics and whatnot. So having easy access to the providers. Prior to like back in January, that's kind of where we were focusing. How do we work with our 10,000? When we're talking about the clinics, it's about 1,000 and 1,500. So how can we work cohesively with those 1,000, 1,500 or 1,500 stores, and work on provider collaboration? So we weren't thinking so much with the digital tools, even though with Aetna and those that aspect of the health aspect of the business, we where we bring it right to your fingertips, or your, where you want it, kind of access to these digital tools. But from the community or local centric retail perspective, we were looking at tools that could ease which were centric towards the provider. So again, like as Kathy said, there's so many solutions. There's such a huge gap in the market. There's so many solutions we are looking for. All of them, again, like it's such a big space. I mean, I am privileged to work with Kathy, Mahieu, and Kathy now, and learn so much about the space. I was walking in thinking very, very myopically at the space. And over the period of time, I've realized how involved it is, how the conditions are not things that you can use one solution for everything, or even within depression, depression as a space, there are so many different solutions that you would want to string together to provide a cohesive, a comprehensive behavioral therapy offering, right? So I really, with working with all of these different weeks and months that we have been focusing on this, I see that probably we want to pick up a focus area and understand where you are, what you are targeting, what you are going for, instead of being too lost in the space around, wellness offerings specifically. There's a huge need of focused effort around therapy and tools around that. I also think some of the innovation that needs to be focused should be flexible. A lot of these solutions are very pointed, and they're, it's so easy to go in and deploy something on Amazon cloud and kind of restrain yourself in a solution offering that is not flexible for an enterprise the size of CVS, right? So if you are actually going towards that market segment and you're going towards enterprise customers, then maybe you want to build solutions that are very flexible and think about your deployment approach and your design approach around that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kathy Mahieu, when you spoke about, you said something about, needing to come up with solutions now, and the phrase "necessity is the mother of invention" came to mind, which I think we're sort of dealing with in every part of life right now. You sort of are like, okay, triage, what do I need and how do I get it? And I think right now the number of shifts and pivots we've seen, Harpreet, to your point about being more flexible, being more accessible, and Kathy, why to what you said about the demographics. There is such a kind of a push me pull you of we have to be able to meet, are we looking to solve for depression? Okay, but depression hits all people of all, age, needs, creed, race, etc. So, that's really interesting of sort of like, which avenue do you want to go down? And then how broadly do you even want to explore that? I think it's really interesting to consider what people need to have in mind to be able to meet those challenges, and how they need to be flexible enough to maybe shift or pivot to be able to provide what people are needing in the moment and for the future.
Two areas that come to mind. One is Kathy called out actually on one of our prep meetings for this, and we've talked about it further than for our workshop and all, is there's a lot of solutions out there already. There's mobile apps, there's messaging, there's sort of chat sort of things you can go to get support, and every single one of them are great. But there is this gap right now in our ability to kind of bring all of those kinds of things together for an individual. So how do you personalize it and bring together different services so that they sort of talk to each other, so that me as Kathy Yacko, if I use two different, like I think I used the example, let's say I had an eating disorder and I was using an app that was helping me with that, but I was also using an app for depression or anxiety. Wouldn't it be great if those apps knew about each other, like that the data was integrated in a way that when either those apps were alerting or messaging me or engaging me, that they were using that information in a combined way, and then I felt better served because the services were more geared to who I am holistically and personally. So that's an area that is ripe for need. And Kathy can talk about that in a minute. And the other area I was thinking of that we've been thinking about in COVID in general, not just around behavioral health, is that, whereas we historically looked at prior data to extrapolate into the future, and we'll still do that. Well, wow, what a shift. I mean, we can't necessarily rely on historical data. We can still use it as some sort of a marker, but we cannot necessarily rely on it. So I think what's really valuable now is to gather data of trends that are going on right now and to begin to model that into the future. And that could happen in a number of ways. So those are just two ideas I'm throwing out.
Yeah, I like both.
And Kathy, I don't know if you want to add more about the one that I tagged you on.
Yeah, there's so much here. I literally could talk about this all night.
I know.
So I have to like pick and choose the things I comment on. So, so I agree with you. You mentioned earlier about, depression in and of itself is huge, because if you think about it, we're looking at it from the perspective from one end of the spectrum, which is how do you keep somebody healthy, mentally healthy, and prevent depression, all the way to somebody who has severe depression and really needs some significant intervention. There's a huge spectrum in between there. And so how do you address and find solutions that address people all along that spectrum? And you could have an app for one, an app for another, an app for another, but how do I, as the consumer, know which is most appropriate for me? That's the big challenge, particularly when there are all these point solutions. And I know that all of those solutions serve a purpose, and many of them provide a lot of value, but it's really confusing to the consumer as to what's right for me when. So that's our biggest challenge, and that's what we're focused on, trying to help our members navigate. But I'll also comment too on the structure of these apps and I think the propensity for folks to go in the direction of an entirely online solution, which for some people works, for others, it just doesn't work. And particularly for people who have depression, those are folks that retreat. They go into their own selves, they isolate themselves from others. And so having a human component to that connects them to other people is really important. And especially now with COVID and knowing that people are socially isolated because of the health reasons, having somebody that you can connect to is so important. For all ranges of conditions in the mental health field. So that's another area that we are exploring and really focusing on, is how do we marry both an online solution with a human intervention or a human component so that people feel connected and really can take advantage of the solutions that can help them best.
Yeah, and I'm curious for your providers also, not just members, not just employees of companies utilizing Aetna services, but doctors who allow Aetna users to visit them. Yes. Are there plans or paths beginning to be forged to make sure they are educated about what is out there so that they can almost prescribe? I know I had mentioned to you gals on our pre-call that my husband is getting his master's in like 30 days to be able to I know we're really close.
Oh my God.
But something he's been talking a lot about is that there's sort of or had been sort of a new bubbling up of getting behavioral health professionals in medical facilities, because it is the adoption of the things that you need to do to keep your body healthy that are behavioral health focused and are mental health focused. So, the example he sets for me is like, if someone is physically unwell and they need to change their diet and they need to take medication at a certain time and they are not good at those behaviors, most doctors, because of the way our hospital system is set up, they don't have the time to sit and consult that long, nor necessarily is that their specialty, behavioral health. They're focused on what is happening inside of you. And so what have you been seeing in terms of that? Are there referrals to those sorts of people? Are physicians looking to be more educated about what is accessible digitally? Are there any interesting partnerships going on? I'm curious what's happening in that space. Harpreet, you're nodding very enthusiastically, so I want to start with you.
I think we, and again, I'll go back to the Minute Clinic side of it. So the way Minute Clinic's set up, or as part of our, that part of the business set up, we have contracts, or we kind of are tied up with our partner with groups of providers, right? And we work closely with them. So then they refer people who need these follow-up visits to keep them on course back to the clinics, right? And that kind of is where a lot of analytical tools or a lot of like self-check tools could help.
Yeah, assessments and measurements, kind of tracking.
And that's basically back to Kathy Mahieu's point. There is a human aspect, but then we need some of the machines to do this heavy lifting work of tracking people's behavior and patterns and whatnot. When they get that time to consult with the provider, we have this issue, right? We have so few providers, and there's a long wait time for you to be able to come see a behavioral a specialist in that area. So when you get that time, when you get yourself that face time, you get that consultation, you want to maximize that time. You want to have that person be ready for you as a person, help you as a person, and not collect your collect your data points or whatnot while they are sitting with you.
Yeah, which is
So
always a very frustrating experience
yes,
when you're with
yes,
a
yes.
professional. They're like,
And
oh, let me learn about you right now while you're sitting
right now,
there.
exactly. So that's kind of where a lot of the focus was. And I mean, of course, COVID has changed a lot of our
Yeah.
priorities right now, so we see. But that's a focus area that I think is important. There's a gap that's important. How do we get them prepped up um, intelligently so they understand you as a person coming in and can serve you in a personalized manner as well. So rightly, while all these amazing digital tools help you in a personalized way, when you come and actually see the human, how can we personalize that for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I could also add, because I think what's so interesting is that we've done some consumer survey information or consumer surveys to understand how our members look for mental health care. So when they need it, who do they go to? What do they go to? What's their resource? And while we'd love to believe that, Aetna is the first, organization they turn to, they actually, when people are looking for mental health services, they go to their primary care doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so they expect to have that individual work with them. And to your point, Charlotte, primary care docs weren't really trained to be specialists in mental health. So, and the system is so fragmented, it's very difficult to, when you identify that somebody needs help, what do you do with them? Harpreet, you just mentioned about, access to mental health care. So try to find a provider and get into that mental health clinician in the next week. Good luck. It's going to take weeks and a lot of work to find somebody and get in to see somebody. So these digital options can really provide a bridge to care much faster and easier. But the challenge, as you noted, is how do providers know what to do and what to prescribe for whom? And so that's really where we're headed in terms of putting these solutions in providers' hands. But also, I want to pick up on something that you said in terms of connecting primary care, as an example, with mental health care. And there is a model that has proven to be highly successful. It has not been implemented widely in the United States, but it's called collaborative care, and it works. There is evidence upon evidence, that it works. And so we are building and promoting that approach in a way around our CVS hubs, in a way that would work effectively, but trying to incorporate the digital solutions into that as well.
Yeah, because it seems like the Western medicine approach is very fragmented. To your point that it is not always a holistic approach. People are like, oh, I see a problem, so I'm going to look at it and we're going to focus on that thing. And it's like, well, there could be like 9 other things that are causing that, or it could be that I don't get good sleep, or I eat bad things, or whatever. So it's always interesting to know sort of what all of the providers are have access to in terms of information that they can share. Kathy, Yacko, did you have anything to add? I saw you taking a note. Not sure if you wanted to contribute.
Not really. I mean, other than I was circling back to what I was saying earlier about connecting the digital apps, but really to both, the points that Harpreet and Kathy were making is, and this is things we're working on elsewhere, is this idea of connected health. So if you are using something at home or on the go, whether it's a smartphone app or whether it's a wearable or something that's available on your Google Home or your Alexa, it would be really helpful for that data to get to your provider, whether it's your, ideally it would be your behavioral health provider, but even if it's your primary care doctor. And to Kathy's point, if we can arm the primary care doctors with a little bit more information so that they have a better means of determining which way to send their patient. So it's about that data sharing. And of course, like the trends we're seeing now with the uptick in using virtual care and digital because of COVID, I'm wondering if there will also be a slightly accelerated, and I say this, not really sure if it's going to happen, accelerated move towards sharing private data because privacy is a big concern. And until we get a trust level with companies, whether it's CVS or any other company out there of, hey, yes, I will let you have access to my data, because I see that you're telling me ahead of time, here's how you'll use it, here's how you won't use it, you will not expose it, you will not sell it, you will not exploit me in any way. But there's this slow sort of progression of folks getting more comfortable with sharing data that will help them. But it's going to be all of us dipping our toes in the water slowly, because we have trust issues.
Yeah.
Rightly so. So I don't know that will be brought on more quickly with COVID. It may, just because we may be forced in some situations, or also it may, even in the broader network, when we think about the hospital and provider networks, and there's already things underfoot with, interoperability. I mean, there's government mandates now. So, all of these things are going to lay the groundwork to make these things more, some of the things that Kathy and Harpreet were just describing, more feasible.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious too, especially with COVID times hitting us all, and that I think people recognizing more that mental health is probably something important for them that they want to pay more attention to for themselves. Just recognizing that, again, unfortunately, the way our system is set up, it's not always easy to just get a referral to a mental health professional, that you have to first find out if you are covered, budget that into what you might already be paying. And like physical therapy, as I have had to learn many times, you have to pay every time you go see that person. Mm-hmm. And then you have to start doing the calculations of, okay, how many times can I see this person that's helping me and my wellness, but not, bleed me dry. So are you seeing any conversations start to percolate around accessibility in terms of referrals and financials and in network and all of that stuff? Is there anything new coming up to really and truly remove barriers?
I know that there's some things at play right now during this, respond to COVID period we're in. Aetna has waived a lot of fees, both for telehealth and, there's a lot of, and they've also made a lot of charitable contributions to programs to help folks get more access. I don't know what the long-term things are that you're asking about. And I've wondered myself, like even pre-COVID, I've thought, with this increased awareness of the importance of mental health as a really important piece of the puzzle in our health and wellness. I mean, let's be, frank that if we can prevent the illness, it's a hell of a lot less expensive than actually treating it.
Yeah.
So I've often wondered in the last year, as mental health and behavioral health have become more, a topic of conversation, if there will come a realization or some studies that show if we do make these services more affordable and accessible, will it pay off in the long run, because we're not having to pay the high cost of treating it reactively rather than proactively? And I'm unaware of that, but it's a question that's certainly been in my mind. I don't know if anybody else has heard anything different.
Kathy or Priya, have you heard anything or have any thoughts?
Not specific to that, and I think Kathy knows that. Kathy, we have spoken about it or worked on this as well. There's one area of mental health where which kind of comes with some chronic conditions. So you kind of know that if you are suffering from some of these chronic diseases, and with COVID, we all can kind of appreciate some of that ourselves when we are in isolation. Some of these chronic conditions are physically debilitating, and they kind of force us in that isolation anyways. And so you do develop some of these symptoms, and you do develop, you have tendencies towards depression, and you are sometimes frequently you're referred to these to a behavioral health specialist along with your when you get diagnosed with some of these chronic conditions. So on some of the work that we are doing is management of a lot, along with those chronic, better management of your of these chronic conditions as a whole, right? So it's all these different things that then also lead into the behavioral aspect, like weight management. It's about your healthy habits. It's all of these different things. So there are programs in place for doing that, or at least programs in place that are starting to do that, to add on to. It's not necessarily solving the issue around accessibility, or, as you said, the financial, but there are some things you can do on your own, and that's like, how can we educate people to do that, and how can we incorporate that when they get diagnosed with other symptoms or whatnot. That's kind of what has been the focus as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, accessibility is a rabbit hole we could dive deeply into, and for all of its very fascinating facets in terms of demographics and systematic things. Kathy Mahieu, anything you wanted to add? And then there was a question that came up in the chat I wanted to bring to you gals.
Yeah, again, I could talk about this all night, but there are two things. So one is what Harpreet was saying in terms of those individuals with chronic medical conditions tend to have more propensity towards having depression, anxiety, other mental health conditions, which drives their costs up significantly. That's the biggest driver of healthcare costs from a mental health perspective. So if you're not treating that mental health component, you manifest it on the physical side. On the lower end of the spectrum, again, referencing many surveys that have been done to test why people who need mental health services don't get it: cost. It's all related to cost. And I think that these digital solutions can go a long way to serve that and address that, because they are less costly. But I think two other points on that. We're looking at using these digital options as a way to relieve some of the strain on the therapy community, the therapeutic in-person solutions that are at such high capacity right now. Many people who need mental health care don't necessarily need to see somebody every week for 6 weeks to have their issue resolved. They could potentially engage with an online solution or a coach that could deliver help to them at a much less costly and more effective means. So I think there are ways of using these digital solutions to relieve some of the strain on that on the mental health care community and free up the space for people who really need it.
Yeah. Which will be a good segue to the second question that came through, but we'll pop up to the first one. Dr. Matt. Hello, Dr. Matt. He says, question with the collaborative care model that has shown success in the past. As the industry is moving toward a bundle-based payment model that should drive more collaborative care, are you seeing that that's happening? As the industry is moving toward a bundle-based payment model, it should drive more collaborative care. Are you seeing that happening as bundle-based care is coming out? And how do you see the ability of digital health apps fitting into that payer model as well?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've been in behavioral health for a very long time. As I said earlier, on the employers, working with employers, and now on the health plan side. And collaborative care has been around for a very long time, but it has not gained a lot of traction. However, I do see that is changing. And I think we are now seeing groups that have done really good analysis to say, it not only works, but I can cover the cost of providing a social worker in my practice to help patients. And the model covers itself in terms of cost. So I think we're starting to see some changes in that and seeing that grow. And to your point about, bundled payment models and those organizations where everything is bundled together, that is more and more providers are interested in addressing mental health because they know it affects physical health, and it can help them in the long run and their patients. So this is becoming, I wouldn't say it's a groundswell at the moment that's rising rapidly, but it is something that I'm seeing much more frequently than I had in the past. So really encouraging and exciting.
Good.
Well, the other thing to add to that, Kath, is that, the collaborative care models are based on outcomes.
Yeah.
And to me, if you're not addressing the behavioral health, your outcomes are not going to be as good. So that might be part of what you're saying, Kath, is that they're realizing, that the teams that are in these collaborative care models are realizing if we don't bring that aspect in, we're not going to get the outcomes and we're not going to get paid,
Right.
as well, or as completely.
Yeah.
So as far as the digital, the other question Dr. Matt had was digital health apps. I think they're a huge part of it. And again, we're sort of at the tipping point now. So I think with the prevalence of Internet of Things, and I see these apps being just another example of them, wearables, sensors, cameras, digital apps. All of these are data streams that are incredibly valuable for the providers, for the doctors, for the payers, for the individual. Because, the old model or the existing model is you went and saw your doctor, once every 6 months or once every 6 weeks, or even in even in behavioral health, maybe you see them once a week, but there's a hell of a lot that's going on in between. And, truthfully, it's kind of like, I know for me, when I go to the doctor, I try to remember all the things I want to tell them, but there's always stuff that slips your mind, or maybe you don't really think it's relevant. Or maybe even you lie to them because you don't want them to really know how many drinks you had last week, whatever. So, it's and I'm not saying the sensors and the wearables and the digital apps are going to completely, give, it's not at Black Mirror yet, where exactly what folks are doing, but I think it is a lot more data than doctors had access to before and payers had access to before, and even patients. Like I think about for myself, if I see the real data of how much I really am sitting on my butt during the week versus moving, or, how much did I really drink today? And I'm talking actually water, not alcohol. just hydrating or moving or exercising or taking time away from my laptop, which is also incredibly important. These are things that even for myself, the patient, are incredibly revealing. So I think the digital solutions are a big part of it.
Yeah, I think that ability for the patient themselves to be able to be that reflective, because you're right. I think a lot of us turn into this very different person when we enter doctor's offices, and suddenly it's scary and you're not sure what you should share, even though you should share as much as possible so you can get the best possible help, that people get nervous. And so having something that's telling them that is kind of the proof of the data to say, like, this is what you were doing, and these are okay things, and we can work on it and we can adapt. But rather than, sort of colloquial data points, real proper ones, I think that could be really an extraordinary.
Another thing that just came to mind, and of course this isn't as relevant right now while we're all, sequestered at home. The last couple of times I went to a doctor, the situation right now with them having to capture all the data into the electronic health record can really be dissuading to building a relationship with them, because not all of them do this, and I'm not blaming them. It's hard. They're busy with their back to you, entering stuff in the laptop and sort of looking at you once in a while, and I think it's incredibly important to be able to read body language and facial expression. And I mean, this is another area that we're experimenting with, from an emerging tech, is even over Zoom meetings like this, is facial coding and voice intonation for emotion AI. Okay. And I'm not saying, that's necessarily the answer, but it can be part of the data streams that come into play. But so, even if so today's problem is, how do we make it easier for the doctor to get that information into the electronic health record so they don't have to be busy on their laptop instead of actually engaging with you one-on-one?
Yeah, it is. It's a funny thing when you're like, hi, I'm over here, please.
Right. And
ask me how I'm doing.
yeah.
Let's get to another question. Rena asks, with the rise of hospital admissions due to COVID, how has that affected the supply of beds for behavioral health related admissions? And what are some of the digital solutions for reducing admissions for mental health issues?
Really an excellent question. I think what I think about with regard to this question is those folks that have been admitted for COVID, and that the significant trauma that has caused them and their family. Many of the people that have been more susceptible to getting COVID have chronic conditions, right? And so therefore they are also more apt to be seeing depression, anxiety, and so forth. So this has just exacerbated that issue significantly. Yeah. So that's a population that we want to make sure that we're addressing from a holistic standpoint and talking about addressing both the mental health and physical needs of them. From a behavioral health admission standpoint, what's interesting is many of the treatment programs that, the partial hospitalization programs, the intensive outpatient programs that are usually very heavily in-person sessions that you have to attend and activities have moved. I think the statistic was about 90% of our providers that have those treatment programs converted to a virtual program. So people who do need treatment have been able to get it through our network, through a virtual means. Impacting admissions is hard. And I think I go back to what Kathy said earlier with regard to how do we use data to identify when somebody is at risk for an admission or a crisis. And that's an area that I think we can use data and use that to inform us and intervene at an earlier point so we avoid those admissions and really get people to care earlier and before they actually get to that crisis point.
Yeah. When you consider, I'm reading again from a question, when you consider mental health apps to potentially deploy with CVS Aetna, how important is for that app to have FDA clearance?
I think it's not, and Kathy might have more to add to this, but I think that's if you're getting into a diagnosis type scenario, as opposed to a managing, the helping to manage a condition. I think the diagnosis, you would probably need FDA clearance, but if it's managing, you probably do not. Kathy, do you have anything to add there?
I would say at this point, it's a data point. It's not something that we say, it has to be FDA approved in order for us to offer it to our membership. What's important for us is that there is evidence and outcomes associated with that app, that it has specific evidence, randomized controlled trials or some kind of data that supports what the claims are being made for that particular solution. Right. And a ton of other things, privacy, security, interoperability and user interface and so forth. So, but I think the FDA piece right now is not as critical. I think it will become more as these solutions become more mature.
Yeah. Harpreet, did you have anything to add before I get to this?
I think that we have covered that.
Okay. I want to ask this last question from our attendees, and then I just have a few sort of silly rapid fire ones for you gals, just so we can end on a little bit of a high note. But Izzy asked, why are more and more therapists going independent of taking insurance, and what is being done to encourage these professionals to be in network? Which she says in parentheses is totally anecdotally based on friends and my own search for a therapist. Are you finding that a lot of therapists are going independent rather than being in an office and through an insurance provider? Are they going sort of rogue? Is that the trend?
Yeah, so this is such a painful question because I think, there are many, many providers that are out there that don't take insurance, and because they don't need to. They have plenty of patients lining up to use their services. Yeah. We are trying desperately to get more providers into our network, but with a focus on quality providers. And what I'll also say is that that does not mean that we don't have enough providers in our network. We do access analyses. We make sure that there is a provider for every member that needs one or is in that area. But the difficulty is getting, not every provider is participating, and a lot of it has to do with they just don't need to. They can accept private insurance, and they have people signing up for them. So this is an issue that we know exists. It's not an Aetna issue. It's a health plan issue, more broadly. So if you have any suggestions, I'm happy. I'm open to hearing them.
Yeah, as my husband is finishing his master's degree, he's kind of talking about, what kind of office does he want to find himself in, and the idea of having a little bit of a spectrum of therapists or counselors available, so that if there's a reputable organization and they want to visit because they know they have the right training or the right mentality or the right approach, it's hard that it might be inaccessible because they don't have a problem getting clients, and so they don't need to take insurance because they're doing fine. It's an interesting conundrum to make sure that there is a balance of those veteran mental health providers who maybe can say, I want to be a little more picky about who I see. I am experienced and I want it to be this way, but maybe having some of those folks who still are of quality, but don't need to narrow their choices and can make themselves available to more people. I think along with collaborative health, that might be something that maybe can come down the line of, providing sort of a spectrum of available people, so that it can be the feeling of that place or that person that you are drawn to, and that there's not that barrier to entry. Gals, you've been so delightful. I feel like, and I hope everyone who has joined us agrees, that we could talk about this forever. I am so thrilled that mental health is bubbling up and people are paying attention, and they are recognizing that how we think and how we behave impacts every part of us, impacts our relationships, our physical health, our lifespans, etc. I was very interested to ask the three of you what you knew about Noom. It is the only behavioral health with physical needs thing that I am aware of and have seen success stories of. And so I'm excited to even know that technology is being created that can help people recognize the correlation between their patterns and their health. And so I'm thrilled to know that women and people as passionate as you are participating in that space and helping to find those solutions. It's really exciting. I'm going to close us out with a few rapid fire questions. They have nothing to do with what we were talking about, so get excited.
All right.
Yes, be ready. Beach or mountains?
Ooh, beach.
Mountains always.
Mountains always. Kathy, Yacko, would you say?
I love both, and right now it would normally be beach, but I'm a little afraid. I would say mountains right now. More space, less crowds.
A cabin hideaway. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
How about for on a road trip or a long car drive, do you prefer to be the driver or passenger?
Oh, passenger.
Passenger.
Yeah, I'm a driver all day, every day. Love it. We might hop in an RV in early August and drive to the West Coast. But
oh, fun.
Good for you.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Wow. Strawberry.
Mm.
Or actually Chunky Monkey, Ben & Jerry's. Gotta say.
What isn't my favorite ice cream? I mean, I love all ice creams. I used to work in an ice cream store as a high school kid, so I don't know, chocolate, I guess. Everything.
Of them. Yeah, I worked at a Cold Stone. It was
there you go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Harpreet, what's your favorite ice cream?
It is vanilla. It's French vanilla. I load it up with tons of stuff, but it is.
It's good, a classic.
It's a good.
I cannot be more boring, but yes, that's what it is.
Yeah, and then you can mix in anything you want.
That's kind of what it is. I mix in what I'm thinking of at that given moment, and then I can be adventurous.
Nice, whatever you find. What is a favorite local spot that currently you cannot take family and friends to, but where is someone that where is a place that you really love when people come to town that you're like, we got to go to this place? A restaurant, a historical site, whatever.
Wow.
So I can go first because it's right. It's right. I live in a town right by Morristown, which is a historical George Washington, a lot of history, blah blah blah. Right by me, about 2 miles from here, was this property that was owned by King Hussein and Yacko Nasses and King Hussein. Like all of these locals would go to. So it's currently closed. That's one of the places that we go out. It's a farm to table, really, really awesome place. They are converting some of the estate into timeshares. So hopefully, yeah, that would be fun when it opens up. The other very quiet spot, and it's amazing. When we first moved in here, there was this speakeasy bar, which it's on a side of a road, and then there's an apple cider mill right next to it, a very rustic, and there's a set tunnel that used to connect between them, and that's how it worked back then. So this particular restaurant, it's called Sammy's. There is no signage. It's not open during the day. So when we first moved in, it was very, very weird, because at the night it would be thronged with cars, and the parking lot it's completely dark. There's no lights. It would be thronged with cars, and I'm like, I would just nudge my husband, say, I think there's something really shady going on
over there.
No idea what that is. And then I Googled and found out more about it, and it's like everybody who's ever lived in this town knows about it, but none of the outsiders do.
Goes to Sammy's.
That's cool.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Kathy, any favorite local?
Kathy, you go next.
Okay, so I live in a town that is in the Farmington Valley, and there is a mountain, Talcott Mountain, which is 5 or 10 minutes from my house. I can drive there super fast. And at the top of the mountain is this tower, and I still don't know how to pronounce it, Hubline Tower, but it was built, I think maybe 50 years ago. Maybe earlier than that, and it was built for a family. That was their summer cottage, but it's a tower, and it's literally one room per floor, and it's probably 4 floors, and it looks out over the valley, and it is just the coolest thing ever. To get up there, you've got to hike up the mountain, and it's a pretty steep hike to begin with, and then it's another mile down the path. So, and it's got amazing views of the area. So everybody that comes here,
good workout and then a good advantage. Oh,
exactly.
So I have some favorite places like Kathy and Harpreet just mentioned, but if I have somebody visiting Philly that hasn't been here before, I always love to take them. One of my favorite places in Philly are around the Art Museum area, Kelly Drive, Boathouse Row, just walking along the river. I just love that. I went to school in Drexel and Penn, and so I lived in Fairmount for a while, or in Mantua, and so I was right along the river and did a lot of walking there as a student, and just love it. And just the whole art museum area is beautiful. So that's one of my favorite places to take folks who maybe haven't been to Philly. And then, from a work perspective, and I'm going to give you a plug here, I love bringing people to Pennovation. Everybody gets so freaking thrilled. How about it, Harpreet?
Thank you for that, Kathy.
I'm telling you, we were planning that women's debate night, which, hopefully it'll happen in September.
We got it put in.
But when our last visit prepping there, which I think might have been March, my goodness.
It was.
Or February. It was late February, early March. I brought some folks there that hadn't been there yet. And every time I bring folks to Pennovation, I get the same reaction that I got, which is, oh my God, this place is wonderful. I can't wait to come back. No. So there you go.
Awesome. When I joined the organization, I first managed our location in Center City, where PC is a member currently. And then I ended up moving, and I managed the Pennovation Center for almost a year. And I also, Kathy, would swell with pride when new people would come on campus, because that space is extraordinary. And to be able to walk around and be like, oh, there's someone using human tissue to do, digital printing, and they could print you a heart someday. No big deal. It's really,
it really is.
So And to be very casual about it, because, oh, I just see this every day. It's fine. It's really neat.
That's cool.
You know what? You might want to think about Pennovation as a behavioral and mental health salve. Because I'll tell you,
Yeah.
you know, you go there, you come away kind of walking on air a little.
You feel very inspired. You feel very inspired going there. I
For
know.
weeks. You come inspired for weeks. I think that's it keeps you going for weeks.
Yeah, it
Love
is. It's really exciting.
Very
I
exciting.
know. At my days pounding the keyboard, I'd be like, but look at the innovation happening around me. It's great. Well, gals, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel certain that we will have a myriad of conversations ahead of us about how to continue solving and providing and getting access and, connectivity for our most important things, our wellness. Thank you for the work that you do. We are excited to hear what continues to come down and be presented from your organization and others. Kathy, I see like maybe you wanted to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anybody online has any, startup ideas that they want to bring, in this space, feel free to reach out. And, you can reach out through Charlotte if you don't see us somewhere, but we're always willing to listen.
Awesome. And June for Startup Grind is Female Founders Month. I'm going to go ahead and give us this chapter a little pat on the back. The gal I took over for set a mission for herself last year to not make it just June, but make it year round. Actually, I think you gals may have tipped us just over this either is the 13th or 14th month in a row that we have hosted females on our Startup Grind chapter, and it is exciting to have powerful, intelligent, thoughtful, kind women participate in the conversation and remind all of us that we exist. So thank you for joining. But next month, folks, stay tuned. I'm sure we're gonna have someone amazing, equally as amazing, join us. Be well, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Pay attention to yourselves and give yourself the time and the relaxation and the connectivity to others that you need. But be safe, and I hope we all get to be together again soon in person.
Charlotte, thanks for including us.
Thank you.
This was
Thank
really
you
a
so
pleasure.
much. This was
Yeah,
fun.
our absolute
Excellent.
pleasure. Thanks,
Appreciate
everybody. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye.